So what resistance have you seen from the cable companies? Like do you have they and I guess I don't know how much you can share, but have they kind of made an offer to like give you a fee to just shut the hell up?
They haven't.
Okay.
There's never been anything along those lines. I think they're some of the folks that are higher up may know who I am. I don't think most of them do. They're focused
I
on
bet you'd be
figuring out.
surprised.
I think, it's like there's like a lyric about, what if God's looking up too? Kind of like we all think like, they're trying to figure out their next big acquisition. They don't think that they face real competition. They're not
Mhm.
really worried about this. I don't think they're trying to figure out how to acquire each other and create bigger monopolies. So, maybe some I show up on their radar a little bit, but they're still not really threatened. In part because the more decentralized we are, the more they're just not going to pay attention because these are people on the East Coast typically, and they're very focused on hierarchical approaches, and they recognize, like if there's another big company they're competing with, that's what they're used to. But the idea of hundreds of cities taking a fraction of their business, that's just not a threat that they're like, I think they're ready to deal with, and they don't know how to deal with it. So in Colorado, for many years, well, we'll step back further. Longmont is one of the first big cities. Comcast comes in and spends a record amount in a local election to stop Longmont, and they win. But 2 years later, the city does the vote again because people got wise to the fact that they went through a con job, and they succeed. And the city decides to move forward with building this network that I mentioned earlier. Comcast says, you know what? We're done. We're not going to fight these referendums in Colorado. So 100 more communities in Colorado pass a referendum to say we're going to consider municipal broadband or a partnership or something like that. This is unique to Colorado, where cities can't do anything unless they pass this referendum. So I think Comcast then says, well, now we've had 100 of these votes. We need to figure out what we're doing. Fort Collins is going to vote. Fort Collins is like a jewel in Colorado, big, big, attractive city.
Yes.
And Comcast and CenturyLink say, we're going to spend almost $1 million to defeat this referendum. And they lose. And so I feel like they have this sense of like, well, we can't ignore it. We can't spend our way down. They're trying to figure out how they're going to oppose it right now. But the thing that we have in our advantage, frankly, is that their number one issue is California. They're fighting net neutrality state legislation. And so, from their lobbying point of view and their messaging, again, municipal broadband is like, it's like the third or fourth threat that they might face. They're focused on that number one, which is whether or not
Right.
Jerry Brown signs this bill in the next several days to make net neutrality in California a reality.
You're preaching to the choir, man. I'm really hoping, and I think what really went down in Colorado was they legalized pot completely, and then after that, they were like, "All right, we cannot risk fucking with people's Netflix. We gotta get municipal broadband. It's got to be the strongest possible. We can't deal with this shitty customer service anymore. I mean, and when you look at other countries, everybody that did it the right way first, they got the best internet. Everybody that did it our way, like Australia, they handed it off to the corporations. Excuse me. Their internet sucks. It's like we should have done this. Like basically what you're doing, and what I'm trying to help amplify is what we should have done in the first place.
I think so. And I think this is one of the issues that we're going to continue to face around net neutrality, for instance, and these other issues. I think net neutrality is incredibly important, but I am deeply worried about trying to say the federal government needs to protect the internet for all of us. I'm, deeply sympathetic with those who are worried about what the federal government does with increased regulatory authority. What I think we ultimately want
You're
is.
sympathetic with everyone, man. Do you do yoga? What's your
Oh,
secret?
I'm very not
I'm
sympathetic with
I'm
some people.
trying to chill a little more. I'm sorry,
So
please.
no, but I think so I've studied history a bit, and the last 100 years ago, going through the progressive issues, right? And like you have this big issue of these rising monopolies and centralized power, and there's two things you can do. One is you build a really strong regulator in the federal government, and they try to stop those companies from doing bad things, and that's more or less what the FCC has tried to do. And the FCC has been a tool of business for decades, with the exception, I think Chairman Wheeler under Obama's second administration did a really good job. His first one was
Well,
terrible.
he was kind of pushed to it, though.
Absolutely.
Tom Wheeler
Yes.
was a cable lobbyist, but the public screamed at the top of their lungs. And, Obama, to his credit, did the right thing. He did it in the 11th hour, but he did do the right thing
Right.
and kind of caved to the public's will, loaned his voice of support, which made Tom Wheeler do, what should have been done a decade earlier. But
Right, right. I don't want to give Tom Wheeler credit for doing what millions of Americans forced him to do. You're right about that.
attaboy.
Yeah, fight for the future, fight for the future, free press. A lot of those organizations, they did an incredible job organizing, and they deserve that credit. But at the same time, Tom Wheeler's agenda that was often missed was very pro-competitive, and he embraced this idea. Uh, that's the second way to deal with centralized power, which is to break it up, and that's my preferred alternative. Is that I don't want to have a regulator that can tame Comcast so much as I want to figure out how to force Comcast to compete in all kinds of places. Because if
Mhm.
they don't have these monopolies, they don't have that money to pour into Washington, D.C. and the state capitals to get their legislation the way they want it. And so, like when you said doing it the right way, I fundamentally agree with you. Like the fact
Oh
that this is
no.
hard to
Oh,
do. Did I freeze again?
just one quick bite. It's like, yeah.
um, so what I think we want to do is we want to have a lot of overlapping networks, and so like that there's no centralized power, and so that's just where it comes back to as we're thinking about these issues. We're not going to be done with this in 5 years.
Oh, of
What I
course
want
not.
people to be thinking about as we're still dealing with privacy, as net neutrality, with broadband access, is can we do this in a way that creates a lot of local power and where we can call the shots, or are we just going to be giving Washington D.C. more power and hoping that the right administration uses it in the right way?
So let me ask you this, actually, since you brought up free press, and I too, I echo your sentiments on free press. I've been following them for years. They've educated me so much, and I've read most of Bob McChesney's books. I love the work he does. Um, as of recent, they seem to be, and I know they're policy focused, so that's the reason why, they seem to be very, very just policy focused. We're going to pressure the CRA to go through, or Congress will overturn the net neutrality repeal. We're going to pressure all the state net neutrality bills. And that's great. I'm for all of that. I'm for every tool we can have to fight this thing. But I would like for them to also expand into your world. Has there been any cross pollination there?
They've always been supportive, and in fact,
Okay.
before I got known doing this work, um, they were doing it. Some of the papers in the early 2000s came out of Free Press, and they've always been a real supporter inside the Beltway of this sort of a thing. I think in some ways, I think some of the organizations in DC, they have too much of a hope that we can carry the municipal broadband banner. At the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, we're well known for this. And I think some of them have said, well, they have this issue covered, so we're going to focus on these issues of the CRA, which I could never do in terms
Right.
of really getting
Right.
this
Right.
stuff.
Right.
The other thing I would say that it's important to note, Free Press has really done a great job of working on racial justice issues
Oh,
and
absolutely.
a recognition that as long as we have this level of racial divide, we cannot solve our other problems. It's always used to divide us. And so they've done a lot of work on that outside of the Beltway as well. And I really want to, just to commend them for that.
Oh, totally. This was by no means meant to be a criticism of them, as much as just saying, like, well, when we're making these connections, it seems like they should throw some weight this way too,
Right.
because I think this is the permanent fix. I think that we're trying to hold the lines on net neutrality again, just like we did in 2015. We have a harder fight this time. We're going to have it again in 2021. So it's like municipal broadband solves it once and for all.
I wish.
Well, in time,
No, yeah,
not
no, I
right
agree.
away, but
Yeah,
in time.
no. I'll just say, I mean, this is one of those people have to remain vigilant, and this is one of the
Yeah.
problems is that I think municipal broadband is the best solution, but we have, and one of the reasons is municipal electricity. And you mentioned that Europe and other countries have gone beyond us. We basically invented electricity. We didn't invent electricity. It was there, but we discovered it. We harnessed it. We did all this great stuff to it. Europe were among the first to like really get it out citywide and make sure more people are benefiting benefiting from it. But then we came back, and even though took us longer, we made sure everyone had it. And that was tremendous. But in the course of doing that, we had like 5,000 municipal electricity cities, and now we have 2,000 because a lot of them have privatized. And this is sort of the ongoing work that people need to appreciate again, is that it's not just a matter of getting the technology out there, it's a matter of who's making the decisions about it. If you look in New England, when Sandy hit, that hurricane snowstorm combination, I think it was, all of the places that had municipal electricity, they lost electricity for like 24 hours. The places that had electricity that had been privatized in these big corporations, they lost it for like 5 days, a week. And these are the sorts of things that I think are boring, that I would ask your viewers and you to commit to, is that like once we win and you have municipal citywide service in Pasadena, you have to check in periodically and make sure the city is maintaining it. So people just need to be aware of that sort of a thing. But I'll say this, we lack imagination when it comes to spreading municipal broadband. People like you have tremendous potential to really get this out, not just regionally, but we could try to create a national movement. The person who started the Portland, the effort up there, he's has ambitions to really try and get more people out. The folks that did the Fort Collins referendum, that defended it and made sure the cities passed it, I think they're interested in figuring out how to export this. I spent most of my time in this space just defending municipal broadband and not really going on the offensive. And so there's room there. And if we have a good plan that we wanted to develop, I think Free Press would love to help out and use their resources to that advantage. But we have been insufficiently creative in terms of pushing those sorts of ideas.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and